All we can do now is take you out back and shoot you. That's your only hope. That's our only hope, too. We don't want you spreading this to other people.
That's right.
Exactly. Eliminate the infection.
This is what happens when you don't vaccinate your babies.
Hello and welcome to the Quackast. This is Quackast number 388. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is the marvelous Baines. Hello, Baines.
Hello.
Hi!
And that was Pit jumping in. Pit is here. Yay, she's returned. And Tance. Hello, Tance.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, Pit's doing everyone. And you guys are eating? You lucky bastards. I wish I was eating. Oh, God. Anyway, so in this Quackcast, we're going to be talking about... I don't know how to explain this simply, but just drawing men and women. Okay, that's the simplest way. Okay, simplified ways of drawing men and women, how you as an artist, I as an artist, signal that. You know, in these kind of... simplify things. You, as a comic artist, you're not like doing Renaissance paintings, or generally we're doing simplified kind of drawings, and how we just show that this character is meant to be male, this character is meant to be female, or whatever. Maybe this character is meant to be extra muscly, or this character is meant to have this kind of trait. How do you do that simply as a comic artist? Yay, we're actually talking about comics, not films for once. Weird.
And maybe different personality types and different ages and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah. Excellent.
Differentiation.
Hit on all of that stuff. But first, we've got to talk about the featured comics. So here's the feature for you. Feature.
Hello, this is Quackast, and the feature I've selected for this week is Faded Garden by Alice T, and it is rated T for teen. There are two races in this world that are set up like a chessboard. There are the Firmissimam, which are the white, and the descendants of the human race, who are least affected by the distortion. Then there are the Contaminavit, which are the black, who were fully affected by the distortion, which causes their souls to disintegrate and turn black. The introduction scene begins with a fight over stolen goods between a Contaminavit proselyte and Mina Yana, an unemployed 17-year-old girl. In this world, people must pass an exam similar to a driving test in order to have a weapon, and Mina has brought a pretty big weapon to the fight. The art is drawn using digital ink in full-colored pages. An assortment of bright colors is used for Mina's outfit. Start playing a game of chess between good and distortion and read Faded Garden by Alice T, rated T.
And that was the featured comic. Okay, so next up we have the featured music. And this week, Gun Wallace has given us the featured theme to Mob Ties. Creepy sounds, a shady villa, mystery abounds, who's the killer? Shadows trick, run and hide, bad guys slick, get outside. This is the theme to Mob Ties by Gun Wallace. Take it away, Gun Wallace. that was a featured music. Thank you for that, Gum Wallace.
Yeah.
Okay, drawing men and women. Okay.
Women.
How do you guys approach the womens and the men's? Like, for me, this has been over many years a learning process that I've realized you can't draw really angular features on the women's because people get them confused for men, and this has taken me a long time to learn because I like angular features on ladies, and drawing angular features on ladies is fun because when I was young, the women I most admired in simplified drawings of women I most admired were things like Cruella de Vil or something like that, or Maleficent. That kind of, angular Saxon. So those kind of women or Carmen Sandiego, especially those are kind of those angular characters. I liked that way of drawing women, but I didn't realize that they were drawn that way because they were signaling a special kind of woman. They're not your normal women in those animation things or whatever. Those are like special
Evil.
characters, evil or powerful or whatever, and that's what that signalizes. And when you just draw all women like that, then to your general public, that doesn't signalize something that's feminine to them, even though it signalizes something that's feminine to me. And obviously there's billions of people in the world and they look in billions of different ways, and women all don't look the same, men all don't look the same. When you're trying to communicate something to people, you have to do it in a way that they understand. That's why for so many years people would look at Pinky and they go, "Oh, the transvestite, that's really cool. You're doing you have a trans character as your main character." Or, why have you got a man with a pink wig? That's just weird. To me, she was as feminine as anything, but to a lot of people, no, not at all. So how does it go with you two guys when you're with you guys when you're drawing men and women? Do you have any specific tricks you'll use to signal that this is a feminine character or a masculine character or whatever to people? Or?
Well, one thing that helps, sorry, I'm going to be noisy for a second. There we go. One thing that helps is, aside from anatomy, because I think we're probably going to talk a lot about that before we get into that, I'd like to mention that the way people stand is different. Like, women, their femurs will tend to kind of curve inward more. That not the actual femur bone, but like the legs, like from the hips, they point inward at the knees more and then come back or out. Whereas men, the legs will be less curved in that way.
That's true.
One way.
That's true because the hip bones as we know from ladies have wider hips. Men have narrow hips, which means the thighs at the top, it's easier for men's legs to naturally sit in a more akimbo kind of fashion. Whereas ladies, it's more, it's easier for the legs to point inwards so the knees can come together. It's not, let's say, ladies will always stand this way and men will always stand that way. It's just a natural tendency that the legs can do that. So that's a very good point. So that's a very basic kind of simple fact of anatomy that can cause a whole lot of things that you don't really think about with the poses and stuff, but it can happen.
That could be helpful when characters that aren't necessarily super feminine looking or super male looking. If you don't want to put giant tits on all your female characters or something, but still signal that they're female. Having in mind, the stance like that will help you a great deal.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Yeah, and if you want to signal like a character is gay, for instance, you don't like give them a stupid, ridiculous, exaggerated pose, but you can give them a pose that is not necessarily associated with a very masculine pose, and that can be all the signaling you need just by switching that around. Or if a lady's especially tough or whatever, you can switch it around and give them a more typically masculine pose. Not typically masculine, what would you call it? Yeah, I suppose that's a good way of saying it.
Yeah.
A pose that people generally understand to be masculine.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason why I'm prevaricating is I don't want to say this is masculine and this is feminine.
No, yeah. And I think that's the thing that we tend to tiptoe about when we talk about this kind of stuff is, a preface to all of this would be that the way we're talking about any of these things is not the way that we think that men and women should look like.
Yes.
It's just how when you draw forms and stuff like that, and if you want to communicate certain things, these are things that you should keep in mind. So
yeah, because it's the generally understood language at least in the West, in the culture we've been brought up with. This is the way you do it. I notice, like, say for Indians or Chinese or whatever, they've had slightly different cultural influences, and different ways, different poses and things like that are considered masculine and feminine, so that it does not translate to all cultures. Like men will hold hands in India, things like that are not considered masculine in the West are considered, all different stances and things. It can be very different depending on what culture you come from. Yeah, so we can't be culturally deterministic. This is always masculine.
I do think, though, like I'm thinking, even the examples that you mentioned, like Maleficent and Cruella de Vil, that are definitely very angularly drawn. They are angularly drawn in a very angularly drawn setting in general. I mean, even the wife of the guy that has the Dalmatians, and I don't remember her name, she also has a more angular sort of line work that she's drawn in. And
Cruella is still much more angular compared to her.
Yeah, definitely. But she still conforms. The point I want to make is that although she's very angularly drawn, she still conforms to specific things that are absolutely female. Like if you see the frame of her body under the coat, it's the coat that makes her very blocky, because underneath she has a distinctly female body, although it's not sexy or anything. It's the body of a woman. She has the hips, she has the way the rib cage tapers in naturally, and the way that she walks again is how a female could walk, although she's not like wily or trying to allure anyone with her looks or anything, but she still comes across as female because of how she stands and because of how she holds her pipe and things like that. She holds it in a female fashion.
Yeah.
So although she is very angular, and she's super angular actually, it doesn't mess with the signal that she is a woman, and a woman that she probably, that is perhaps on the ugly side even, more with her behavior, I would say. But anyway, she's a woman through and through. And Maleficent, again, if you see how she holds, like when she holds her staff and she's stroking the crow, raven, whatever it is, it's a very graceful, very female way to do it. She doesn't. Her poses are very female again. and the way that her whole body shape is drawn, as much as we can see it, refers to a woman
Yeah.
more than a man.
Well, that goes really well with, taking into consideration stance and stuff, because it's a great point about how she strokes the bird, like that sounded sexual for no reason at all, but how she strokes the bird. I mean, that's a really good point to think about it. It's like something about her fingers, the way she kind of uses her fingers individually. There's something very feminine about that. Not just bad guy, but very feminine.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, you can signal in other ways if you shift the balance a bit too much in one way. You can reel it back by making up for it by making this trait more feminine, or not even just increasing the femininity of this thing, just making that part feminine and whatever. You guys said it better. But yeah, that makes a good point. What about masculine kind of traits? Say in Disney they do it. Oh God, talking about films again. Asterix. That's what I'll bring up. Asterix. Okay, so for Asterix, I'm talking about a comic for once. The way they signal masculinity is they give men outsized torsos, like really long torsos. I think, yeah. And the women
Also
often have shorter torsos. What's that?
Big hands.
Yeah,
have,
you're right. They have huge
hands.
hands. Yeah, the females have smaller hands. The men have big hands and big long torsos. And women...
feet.
Fit? Oh, feet, yeah. Yeah, the females have tiny feet in Asterix. As I think the feet are the smallest thing about them. Yeah, everyone has big heads though.
Yeah, like even if you take, that's a good example with Asterix. If you take Bonnemin in English, the wife of the chief.
I know which one you mean. Yeah.
And if you take the wife of the geriatric guy,
yeah,
they are very different types of women. One is the very aggressive housewife that wears the pants of the house, basically, and the other one is the more female-looking, very sexy mistress sort of thing, who also wears the pants in the house. But that's another thing. And if you see, like, they have completely different body types and heights and everything. They are absolutely different women, but they all have stances, as Pitface said, that are very decidedly female. The way that they walk around, and the way that they hold things is very female. Their hands are generally small and delicate compared to their husbands, and their feet again are on the small side.
Yes.
And they all cut waists, all of them. If you notice, even though you wouldn't expect in Bonnemin, or that's in Greek she's Bonnemina. She cuts a very, very thin waist, actually, if you see, although she's a chubby lady. And most of them do. And even the very fat ones still cut waist. As we say, it tapers in quite a bit, even for their size.
All right, yeah, that was very much a kind of standard way of signaling femininity back in the day, because although we don't have such a focus on that now in artwork, the whole waist hip bust ratio was that comes from the 19th century when corsetry was defined a woman's form, and that was still a popular thing. Even though it took a break in the 1920s, that was still a popular thing all the way into the 1950s. So women's shape was
I would just like to add also, because there is this argument that when you make a woman very effeminate, then you cannot make her be very dynamic or able to beat people up or anything. There is a very good example in Asterix. There is this book. I don't remember the title, and even if I did, it would be in Greek, where the ladies have to take a potion, and they go into this barracks, the Roman barracks, and they absolutely beat the shit out of the Roman. All of them, like all the ladies of the village, the iconic ladies, from the chief's wife to the very ethereal geriatric wife, who doesn't have a name, by the way. She's always known as Mrs. Geriatrix.
Really?
And they all come across as being able to absolutely bash the soldiers in. And they are still drawn very, very female, very female. They are drawn very female. And they still, and they have very effeminate ways of hitting, but it still feels like a very heavy slap or a kick or, or a punch or things like that.
Oh my God.
And I think it's a very good sequence to show as an example that you can have a woman looking like she is absolutely being painful to someone else. And she can still be very, very, not sexily, but effeminately drawn. That's the point. She can be. Doesn't have to be, but she can be. It's not impossible or even all that hard.
Okay. Yeah, so those characters were drawn in a female way that was very much influenced by, I don't know, maybe that was first Asterix was probably done in the 1960s or 1950s, I don't know. So that comes from that older way of drawing, because we don't draw female men and women. Obviously that's their particular style, and people don't draw in that particular style, but that comes from that older tradition, whereas now we have we don't draw cartoon characters in that particular way. They had a different kind of signaling, especially for female characters, which we don't really have in this time. Females, I don't know. I do think people tend to draw women. For men, it never really mattered that much, although they did have a very specific way of drawing some men, like the ultra-masculine men in Asterix were the centurions, and that was just centurions would always look the same. Massive inverted triangle chest, huge arms, huge big fat chin, and there was very little variation between centurions, and that was always how they were drawn. And that's an incredibly exaggerated version of masculinity. But yeah, that was something. Go on.
Well, in Asterix, men and more than women, but women also are drawn basically following more the rules of caricature, rather than actual live drawing. But you can see the super sexy male in the books where you have a pretty boy that Asterix and Obelix have to save, and usually Obelix is jealous of him because he gets the girl, and he will be always drawn in that very specific male inverted triangle, nice jawline, tall, tapered waist, but tapered for the male figure, and he will be the Romeo of the thing, and he will always have this design, whereas all the other men have mostly exaggerated features regarding what they want to underline in each character's personality. Like Asterix has the eyes and the eyebrows and the wings on the helmet because that's where we're meant to focus, that on his intellect, on his wily planning, and his reactions to whatever he feels is stupid, basically. Whereas, for example, others have like a bigger belly, or they have more of a chin, especially those that engage in fighting a lot. These piles of goals brawling every time.
The blacksmith particularly has a massive chin because he's that talks about his particular character.
Yeah. So. Exactly. Like they are more caricatures than anatomically correct, quote unquote.
They do have a lot of signaling, though, to say,
Oh yeah, but that's why they're caricatures in the first place, because they signal, they exaggerate the elements of a drawing that would signal certain things. So.
Yeah, precisely. They do it very efficiently, but I think that does point to an older tradition of doing that, or older pop cultural norms. Whereas these days it's a bit different. You wouldn't signal things in the same way if you're drawing, men and women and all these different things, because the language, the visual language has changed a bit. Maybe it's influenced by possibly influenced by manga and anime, because that's been a huge huge influence on our culture. And I think things have changed a bit. I suspect no longer is there that waist hip bust ratio being so important anymore in Western comics or Western artwork. Not as it was in the whole Asterix and Obelix day. I think muscles are the thing for men these days now, more than, say big chin or whatever. It's important to have the male characters being muscular, especially in like superhero comics. So even if a character is just like a normal kind of Joe, maybe he's not a superhero, maybe he's just a normal guy, he's going to have lots of muscles and craggy features and stuff like that to indicate he's a man. And and women have a particular way of looking in all these things. I don't read many of these Western comics. I can't really speak too in depth, but I do notice there is a different way of rendering these things than there used to be. I read a lot of webcomics. I can say that. I read thousands of webcomics, and people do signal those things in different ways. Like, okay, you guys, how do you approach it when you're doing your characters?
Well, I put bows in all the hair of all the ladies.
Yeah, okay, that's makes sense.
They always wear nice dresses.
Yes, okay.
And the men always
they have a pipe and a hat.
Have a pipe. And, I don't know.
The Mrs. Pac-Man approach.
That's right. Yeah, get it right down to its essence. Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man.
Like
add a bow.
Or a dress with polka dots if you're following the Minnie Mouse approach.
Right. I actually I have a very simplified kind of style, and I guess it's maybe it's like the manga influence. I took the lipstick off of most of the characters. What was that noise? Excuse me 1 second. I'm sorry, you guys.
It's not you.
Pardon me.
I don't know. It's gone.
Runny nose. Anyway, so more like emphasizing eyelashes, and we were talking before we recorded about the overly, like if you have a certain type of woman who looks more angular, and we talked about it on the podcast too. Sometimes I notice like a woman will look too masculine, whereas like she'll have features that would look fine on a real woman, and they would look, not look masculine per se, but if you do the wrong line in a simplified style, it can ruin the whole look. So I found that sometimes, especially with the lipstick taken away.
Yeah.
That I'll have it can easily, especially my character Abigail, can look mannish if I draw her wrong. Not usually, but once in a while it happens. They tend to have quote unquote female looking hairstyles.
Okay.
I guess that helps a lot. And then I sort of, if it looks wrong to me, I just kind of fix it, maybe soften their features a little bit. Add in some eyelashes or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, that does help.
It's better.
I mean, if you're putting makeup on a female character, that is the cheat code. That's way easier to do if you give them big red lips and black eyelashes. Because some people are so stupid that they think that women are born with. Some people, not stupid, but say some people think that women sort of naturally have long dark eyelashes and red lips all the time. So that does make it easier to do. But yeah, that's a weird thing. And if you don't do that, then I'll think, oh my god, that's a man. Why isn't that like if you drew a woman with hairy legs, then people go, oh my god, that's masculine, obviously. But that's just signaling, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's a code. That is a social code.
Yeah, like I did Pinky with hairy armpits many times. And people go, oh my god, that's freaky. It's people can't really cope with that kind of things.
They can't cope with
People have said that before, that's freaky, that you give her hairy armpits.
Yeah. At the moment, I've got her waving her hand in the latest thing, and I was meant to give her hairy armpits, but I forgot. And yeah, I missed that whole chance to do that. But yeah, of course, people are have that kind of reaction, which is fun. Actually, it's fun to play with that. So yeah, it's good to kind of transgress and play with those ways of signaling. Speaking of signaling male and female kind of characters or traits. There have been times many times when I've been drawing so many women, so many pictures of women that I can't remember what makes a character masculine or feminine. And my men have all looked very female, and they've stood in very female poses, and I thought, what the hell? And I've had to redraw the same figure 50 times because I've just forgotten how, what's the difference? How to make a masculine character. I just think, this isn't working. Why are all my men looking like women? And I've had to give them exaggerated jaws and stuff like that. And then the opposite happens. I forget what makes a character feminine, so I've given these characters gigantic breasts in order to try and counteract this affecting. The character's just not looking female. What's wrong? What am I doing wrong? I think that was a lot earlier in my artistic career, but that used to happen. You exaggerated the wrong kind of traits in order to signal. Have you guys ever had that, or am I alone in that?
I have it, all the time. it happens. Like I'll draw, not really in my comic, but when I'm drawing in a slightly more realistic style, the edges of a female's face will be too, just like I was saying before, will be too sharp, and she won't look right. She won't look like the kind of female I'm trying to draw. She'll look like a dude.
Dude. You're a dude.
And so I just all I do is I put a shopping center behind them. And then you know the female. Then I have the guys like if you
making you a nice sandwich.
Exactly. And the dude, I'll just make him not listening to anyone.
He'll be driving a dump truck.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Should be pushing
always draw him forgetting people's birthday and stuff like that. You know, it's a guy. So that's what you have to do. But yeah, I find it regularly. Like a lot of it is like adding too much detail.
Yeah. That's a real rule. You age characters exponentially.
I was going to say the same thing, like one line in a cartoonish style, like ages a character 10 years or whatever that adage is.
Literally. It does.
Yeah.
Well, virtually.
It really does.
But yeah, that's the thing. If you add too many lines and stuff, you not only age them, but you can make a character more masculine or more feminine by doing that. I had the problem, like when I said like I draw female characters too angular. I still do that. It took me a long time to realize that, it's the feminine character shouldn't have big jaws, shouldn't have angular jaws, things like that, wide chins. Although people in reality do, in a drawing, in a simplified comic, that does not signal what you want it to signal. So, yeah, and male characters, if you give the men the chin is too soft, the jawline is too rounded, it's not going to look masculine. It's just, your own jaw might be like rounded or whatever, and that's fine as a real person, but in a simplified, stylized comic, it just does not project what you want it to project.
I think to a point, the more stylized you go, the more you have to codify certain things and ascribe to certain codes, visual codes that we are all more or less kid to recognize. But that said, I think that it doesn't need to be amazingly pronounced or even underlined in a sense in order to have the masculine or feminine effect. All it needs is just enough to make it a little, to make it cross the line from being on the fence, being on either side of it, just enough. I have found that often all it takes to make a man or a woman gender bent, basically, is a little how I draw the jawline, but not all the jawline, just the side on the back, like the back of the jaw, and whether I choose to draw this in or not. If I don't even draw it, it's a woman, or a boy. This is a young person. Or if I do draw it in, it's a man, and it's going to be a man. Assuming, of course, that I don't, like I could draw the jaw and everything else be coded for female, and it will look female, just with an angular jaw. I think the thing is that you shouldn't hit all the check marks for female in order to make someone that is a man have certain traits that would be normally female, but you want them on a man for whatever reason. And then just make sure that you have the rest of the elements that code for male there and present.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, you don't need to be exaggerated when you're drawing a masculine character. Like, give them a huge Latin jaw, make them always walk with their knees as far apart as possible.
That's what I should have said instead of the not listening. Yeah, if it's a guy, he's like spreading out on the subway.
Yeah, spiky hair sticking out of every
face.
orifice and plane and angle of his face and body. Just totally hairy and he's gotta be a Superman. Like massive bulge at the crotch level. Just just a mountain.
That makes a lot of sense though to what Tan said there.
Yeah, it does.
And it also makes me realize that it is I don't know how general this is for people who draw or whatever, but it is the jaw. It's the jaw that always causes this trouble for me. Like if the character looks the wrong gender, it's a subtle fix around the jaw almost every time.
Yep, I agree. I've run into that problem a million times myself, a million times or more. In the latest page that I'm drawing right now, Bottomless Waitress, Polly's face. I just did not know what was wrong. And I worked it out that I had given her too defined a jaw, too angular a jaw. Her chin was a bit too long. And as soon as I fixed that up, and it took me a while to fix it up too, because then when I just cut it off and gave her a curved face from, that angular cheek, angular jaw start, then the face was too rounded and it was no longer the character, because the character is meant to be a tall lady with a long face. And if you just give her a curved face from there, then her face is too fat and too wide. So you have to completely redesign the face to give it that long oval without being bulging down at the bottom. Yeah, that was tricky. So it's weird with faces because tiny bits can change it massively. Because you're not only coding for like male or female, or particular character traits. You're drawing a particular character who has to look a particular way, which adds another level of complexity. So she's not just a generic female. She's
Polly.
She's Polly's a particular person.
Yeah, and you also have to, like how we were discussing before we recorded, we started recording this. You might want to give women or men a different approach to what they do with their own looks, or you might want to have a very beautiful woman that could be sexy come across as not sexy at all with her behavior or the way that she acts and the way that she possesses space in the panel of your story. Or you might want to have a less beautiful lady to be actually alluring and sexy and charming and the object of people's affection. And you have to code for this in how you draw them. And you will need to make the woman very beautiful and not the object of someone's wet dreams. Like, okay, we don't know what people dream, but I mean, in general, she will not be giving off the vibe that that's what she at least is going for, no matter what the recipient does. And that will definitely need to be shown in the way that you draw such a person. And that goes again for the men too. You might have someone that is absolute beefcake and will not act like it. Will just not do fan service for for nothing, like not even to save his life. And you have to make sure you draw that so that people can see that he could have been doing this, but he doesn't do it.
Could be like Adam in He-Man.
Yeah, I'm not sure that he doesn't do it by choice. I think that he doesn't know what to do with himself in general.
The character's so bizarre. Oh, jeez. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so characters, the way they... You've got many different aspects to them, and you can slightly alter them in many different ways. And yeah, you don't have to turn all the dials up to 10. Sort of like this one's down to 5, this one's down to 2, this one's up at 3. You know, you can change different aspects as long as you have them on balance in the right area. Then you're coding for what you want. That's really a more complicated way of what you were saying. Too. The analogies are a bit too airy fairy, but yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's really it's fun to play with those balances, but it's so easy to get them wrong. I find anyway.
Yeah. A little subtle thing wrong.
Yeah.
Makes it look wrong.
For years and years, that has been the, my problem. Is I've always had trouble with that kind of stuff. Like, drawing masculine characters was the hardest for me. I'm better at it now, but it took me years to learn how to draw men right and masculine characters, because I like drawing women, and that's what I drew more than anything else. So it was... I started out drawing the masculine characters with beards and things like that in order to make them look more manly. But I still had them standing like women all the time, and the bodies weren't that angular or anything like that. They're always more rounded, and I always got the hips too wide. So even without breasts or any of that kind of stuff, they still coded for female, or coded for female with a beard. Why has this woman got a beard?
Wow, that's really... when all your readers are going, why does that lady have a beard? Like, wow. Really...
Bearded lady.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's funny. So Pinky is too masculine because of the angular features, but all my men were too feminine because they were too rounded. Yeah, I just was no good. It took me a lot to learn how to do that, because as Tance was saying, and Baines was saying as well, this counts a lot more for when you're doing stylized, simplified characters. So if you're doing something that's more realistic, and you can put more and more detail, more lines on the face and all this, and you can add way more detail, then you don't have to be so careful in your coding. It's a lot easier to make things appear as you want them to appear.
Yeah, it can still come into play, though, of course.
Oh, it does, yeah.
But yeah.
But the more you subtract, the harder it is. Yeah, I think it is a lot harder to do very, very simplified characters and have them come off as the way you want them to come off, or appear as the way you want them to appear.
Yeah.
Which is a weird kind of a dichotomy, but it's there. It's true.
Yeah.
That's something I worked out a long time ago. That something like a Peanuts. To just pull out something that's very stylized and simplified.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Is that kind of work, even though it looks incredibly simple and basic, has a lot more thought gone into it than more complicated stuff. Because it has to. It's like incredibly complex mathematical equations. When you know that they're really well done or well thought out, it's because they're incredibly simplified. E equals mc squared is an amazingly simplified equation that we all think we're geniuses because we can remember it. But in order for Einstein to come to that, that took like blackboards and blackboards and pages, like, you know, massive books worth of equations in order to come to that simplified equation. So it takes genius. You know, obviously comics don't necessarily completely relate to that kind of thing, but, you know, it's the same kind of principle in that when you simplify things right down, it takes a lot more work when you simplify it down and still have it mean what you want it to mean. And that comes from me, who doesn't simplify things down to that level at all. I would be hopeless in doing that kind of super simplified comical work. Because that's a lot more complicated than what I do in Pinky TA with my more realistic characters. A lot more. So even your work, Baines, you say you're not that great at drawing or whatever, but you are, obviously. You've learned a lot over the years, and you've come to draw your characters really well. But they are a lot more simplified than Pinky TA characters, and so that there's a lot more thought that goes into the design and the look of the characters versus the Pinky TA characters, which are more realistic. So I just have to draw them as, you know, normal people in my own weird kind of style. So I like TK. He's a very, you know, recognizable character in the way he looks like. You know, he's a male character. You know his age from looking at him, and, you know, that high hairline and all that kind of stuff, and the specific way he looks like. He's got these bulgy eyes and all that kind of stuff, but you still know, you can still see a lot of traits in him. And it's a very hard thing to code for in a simplified character. Don't you agree?
To code, I still don't really understand to code for, like, what exactly you mean by that, but
well, he represents a whole lot of things, but they aren't
right. Yes, okay, I see what you're saying.
In him. You're not sort of writing on his shirt, you know, his age.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. It's to get him wrong with, you know, the sort of the length of his face and the expression in his eyes and stuff like that is, you know, it does happen, but he's definitely easier to do with all those, like, distinctive features, like the glasses and the hairline and the sort of lines on his specific lines on his face and stuff like that. His body language seems to fall into place more easily because I have a good handle on his kind of personality and where he's at and stuff like that. Yeah, like if he looks wrong, I can kind of, like, figure out why relatively quickly.
And you have characters like Penelope, who is a bit more transgressive in that, you know, her body type you'd think of as typically a more masculine kind of figure, because that's how that is usually coded for in comics. You know, if a character's big like that, big blocky shape, big head, that's a man. But you know, but you still manage to make her as a very female, very, very female character in the way, you know, she holds herself and the way she acts. Yeah, and when she's doing action-oriented things, like, I have run into that where she looks a little mannish in this. So I make little adjustments, but yeah, usually she's very feminine in a way and very kind of stereotypically maybe masculine, if you will. Yeah, physical. Some of her physicality, but yeah. It's a really cool character in the way she's done. I always have admired that. I've drawn her once, not very well, but I did.
Oh yeah, you did. Yeah, that was great.
For a cover.
Yeah.
That was that was a lot of fun to do, but really hard to do in that style because I was not used to it.
Right. Yeah. Cartoonish, gigantic eyes and all that jazz.
Exactly. And not only do it in that style, but actually give put it in a scene and give the character emotion and all that kind of stuff. And
Right.
yeah, that was fun. But okay, we haven't heard from Pitt. What?
You said everything already.
So your characters, I have, but your characters are mostly men. You don't do very many females at all.
Mm-mm.
You're mostly a man drawer.
Mm-hmm. Man eater and a man handler. Korean.
But your characters manslaughterer. But you mostly do the male characters, and you do them exceptionally well. I mean, Bones is unmistakably very masculine, even though he is, a long-haired character. He's not. A lot of your male characters have long hair, or maybe 2, at least 3. A few anyway. But so you've got all that kind of stuff, and they're reasonably slim too. But they're unmistakably masculine. Always.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Super masculine.
Yeah. So, I mean, Bones, he's a guy. And you can tell by his face, he's got the kind of proportions we were talking about before. He's got a nose with character that usually registers as being a male feature when it comes to just kind of line art. And he's got broad shoulders. The sleeves of his shirts are always ripped off. So so it's easy to see his shoulders are defined. Yeah, and his shoulders are defined, and he has very blocky physique. So yeah, he registers as male. And I could say the same thing 10 times over for my other male characters. I don't know what else to add, really.
They always have very distinctive features, like you said. Yeah, the nose with character. Your characters have a lot of lines in their faces to depict, expression or whatever.
Yeah. And that if I have had more difficulty with anything, it's that when I do draw my female characters, I want to give them more lines, and I always have to stop myself.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times I don't when I can, because Putrid Meat was always a comic that I could have more, kind of weird, scraggly characters and stuff that aren't super defined one way or another. But like when it came to characters like Gretchen, for instance, who are, supposed to be sexy and stuff like that, I can't put a lot of lines in her face, and I need to keep her features more or less, just kind of common female features. And that was always kind of hard for me because I always wanted to make them more interesting in one way or another. But what you have to do with that then, see, because then the trap that you fall into is that all of your females start to look the same, not just in body, but in face, facial features. And that's a trap that's really easy to fall into. And so just kind of be aware of, even if you have feminine facial features, those can still have some variation. And when you find a certain combination of variations, such as eye shape, nose positioning, lip shape, jaw shape, cheek shape, forehead shapes, and stuff like that, even when they're just very minimum, if we, as human beings, we're rigged to be able to recognize features like that, and tell them apart in people. So just try and make sure you include kind of variation, distinct eye shape or face shape and stuff like that. It doesn't have to be super crazy in order to stand out or to be recognizable, I should say.
Right.
Yeah. So you don't always have to do the same thing. Like, that's one thing I still hate in American superhero comics, that 90% of the women are all the same woman. Not just body shape, but their faces. Identical.
And that's very much how I learned how to draw female faces too. So that's what kind of clued me into, that's a landmine that I kind of have to try to avoid. And not to the point, like I said, that you have to reinvent the wheel every time that you make a new female face, but just to have it somehow just distinguishable.
Yeah.
Like the women that you have drawn for Brave Resistance are distinct and different. Like if you take Tula by comparison and compare her to Maria or Sophia, they all three are very recognizably different, and all three come across as ladies, and all three have very distinct features that are unique to them. So yeah, it really comes down to conforming to what the human eye looks for in order to decide the gender or sex for a human being. If you have like more percentage of those features, then your character will come across as female rather than the other one.
The other one.
Yeah, I'm trying to translate for the rule to mean to go for both male and female, but I'm too tired to keep this concept. So
I know what you mean, but
you get the other one.
That does change for like ethnicity as well, though. Say if you're drawing Indian people, Indians tend to have rounder features, at least for a greater proportion of them. So things that would code for, but they tend to have moustaches. Not all Indians, but a lot of Indians who have rounder features. Yeah, only the women. So yeah, if you're drawing them. Yeah, so that's a weird thing. Ethnicity can be a weird thing if you're depicting that. You don't want to code for that too strongly, or else you will come across as racist. So, like I have real difficulty if I were to draw African characters, like Black African characters. That would be tricky for me because I haven't drawn that many. So I wouldn't be very good at drawing those characters without emphasizing lips and noses, things like that, too much. So that would be very, very hard. That would for me when I was a lot younger and I was drawing women, and drawing massive breasts. I'd be doing that with other features, like maybe for like a Chinese man or something like that. I might draw the eyes too narrow or that kind of thing. So that would give me conniptions. I'd be very worried that I'd come across being a caricature, a racist caricature in my drawings. So I would be very nervous about that. So, but. Then you have the problem of your comic's too white or whatever. You're too monocultural or monoethnicity. So yeah, it's hard to get around that without being culturally insensitive. It's a tricky thing.
I think that's a whole other kind of Quackast because
it is. There's more things to get into in that. Yeah, definitely a very interesting topic, though. I think
we've talked about it before.
We have, though. I think.
We never have. It's a new podcast idea. We've never done before.
Though, yeah, we should have someone who has more experience with it. Get a black person on or something.
There are some, especially on Twitter, which is another motivation for you guys to get on Twitter more. There are some excellent tutorials by artists that are very skilled in this, and usually they are people of color, on how to draw colored people. as cartoons without making it look like a 1940s racist Disney sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there are certain tricks that very it's the code that we were talking about. They give you the code, like do this and do that, and you're gonna be safe, and everyone will get it that it's a colored version, even if you don't actually draw full color cartoons.
All right,
So.
we could get Pepe on board. Remember she has her excellent her brilliant comic. What was it? Damn it, not Dead Fingers. But,
Dead Fingers.
Yeah, not that one, but the one she did afterwards.
Yeah, it's a prequel she's doing afterwards. Blanking on the title, but yeah.
Wait, I was looking at it today. Why can't I remember it? One moment. I'll find it and.
It's a great comic, but
it's one of my favorites. For some reason the title's not coming.
The thing is with it though, she's got she draws her characters however she wants. She has them with all sorts of skin tones and facial features or whatever.
That's right.
And she doesn't run into any problems. So
it's Cosmos Song.
Cosmos
exactly.
Song.
I just found it.
I'll make a note of that. I'll link that in the notes. Cosmos Song.
Yes.
Although that isn't, as Pitt said, that's a whole other Quackcast. I will link that. Because that's a great example of being skilled enough and confident enough to tackle all sorts of different kind of characters. All right, this has been the Coding for Men and Women Quackcast. Thanks, guys, for doing
genetic experiments.
Oh yes, with the triple XYZ of genetics. Damn it! Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.